Royal Guard was escorting a fallen soldier, but airport staff tried to stop him. Captain James Harwood woke up before dawn that morning. The sky outside was still dark, and the chill in the air reminded him that the day ahead would be heavy with meaning. Today he had a task unlike any other he had ever faced. He had been a Royal Guard for over a decade, trained to protect, serve, and uphold honor, but the mission ahead was different. It was not about guarding a palace or standing tall in ceremonial drills. Today, he was entrusted with escorting a fallen soldier home, a soldier who had given his life in service to his country. Private Thomas Miller had been more than just a soldier to James. They had trained together, faced challenges on the field together, and shared the quiet moments that soldiers cling to when the world around them is chaos. Thomas had been young, full of life and dreams, with a smile that could light up the darkest moments. When James had received the news of his death in action, a part of him had felt as if the ground beneath him had disappeared. And now, James's responsibility was clear. He would bring Thomas back home, ensuring every step of the journey honored the sacrifice that had been made. The military base was still quiet when James arrived. Soldiers were already moving in preparation for the solemn task. The air was heavy, filled with the sound of distant engines and footsteps echoing on the concrete. Every detail mattered. The coffin, draped in the national flag, was placed carefully on a platform. Its polished surface gleamed under the dim lights of the hangar. James approached it with reverence, placing his hand gently on the smooth wood. It was not just a box. It was the vessel carrying a life, a story, and a family's deepest sorrow. As he stood there, memories of Thomas began to flood back. He remembered their first day of training together. Thomas had been nervous, unsure of himself, but determined. He had a strong sense of justice and an unshakable loyalty that made him stand out. James recalled the countless drills, the laughter shared during brief moments of respite, and the quiet conversations under starlit skies when the two had shared hopes for the future. Those memories made the coffin in front of him feel unbearably real. The man inside had been full of energy, now still and silent. It was a stark reminder of the cost of the life they had chosen to lead. James carefully gave instructions to the team around him. Every movement had to be precise, every gesture respectful. The coffin was lifted gently and placed onto the vehicle that would take it to the airport. The soldiers accompanying him moved with quiet efficiency, understanding the gravity of the moment. There was no chatter, no casual jokes, only a solemn focus on the task. The convoy moved slowly, with James at the front, his uniform crisp, his face set in a calm expression that belied the storm of emotions within him. As they drove to the airport, the landscape passed in muted shades of gray. The sun had not yet risen, and the world seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the journey of a hero being brought home. James glanced at the coffin through the rearview mirror. The flag covering it rippled slightly in the wind, and he imagined Thomas's family waiting somewhere, unaware of the exact moment their loved one would return. He wondered how they would react, how the sight of the coffin would hit them, and how he could carry himself with enough dignity to honor the life that had been lost. Arriving at the airport, James felt a new layer of tension. Airports were places of order, rules, and procedures. But he knew that this mission would test more than just his patience. It would test his ability to balance the rigidity of bureaucracy with the honor owed to a fallen soldier. He parked the vehicle near a private entrance reserved for military escorts and began coordinating with the staff inside. The paperwork had been completed in advance. Permissions had been granted. Every detail had been meticulously planned. Yet James could sense that this was going to be a delicate moment. Inside the airport, the hum of activity contrasted sharply with the solemnity of his mission. Passengers hurried past, dragging suitcases, checking phones, and going about their daily routines. For most, it was just another day of travel. For James, every step felt monumental. The coffin needed to be moved carefully, and every member of his team had to act in perfect harmony. He instructed them to slow their pace, to maintain a respectful distance, and to keep the flag visible. The symbolism was important. It was a sign to everyone, even strangers, that this was not an ordinary transport. James paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. He thought of Thomas's parents, who would soon see their son again. Their grief would be overwhelming, yet they deserved the dignity of a proper farewell. This thought strengthened his resolve. Every motion, every instruction, every salute would reflect the respect he felt. He would not allow distractions, doubts, or delays to interfere. The fallen soldier deserved the utmost care, and James would not waver. As the coffin moved through the airport, James noticed the attention of a few passengers. Some whispered softly to each other, clearly aware that something important was happening. Others simply watched with curiosity, not fully understanding but sensing the gravity of the moment. James appreciated their quiet acknowledgement but did not let it distract him. His focus was entirely on Thomas, on completing the mission with honor. The team reached the first checkpoint. Here, James expected cooperation, yet he noticed the subtle hesitation in the airport staff. They glanced at the paperwork, checked procedures, and seemed unsure about allowing a coffin, even one accompanied by a military escort, to proceed without additional scrutiny. James stepped forward politely, explaining the situation and presenting the required documents. He spoke clearly, respectfully, and with unwavering confidence. He emphasized the importance of the mission and the honor owed to the fallen soldier. Despite his efforts, the staff remained cautious. They asked questions, requested additional verifications, and hesitated at each turn. James remained calm. He had faced far greater challenges in his career, from dangerous missions in the field to complex operations requiring split-second decisions. Yet this challenge was different. It required patience, diplomacy, and a steady heart. He could not allow frustration to seep into his actions. The mission demanded composure. As they waited for clearance, James reflected on the journey ahead. He knew that transporting a fallen soldier was not just about logistics. It was about carrying a story, preserving honor, and fulfilling a promise to those who had given everything. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, but it also gave him purpose. He could see the solemn expressions of his team and knew that they felt the same way. They were united in this duty, bound by respect and loyalty. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the checkpoint allowed them to proceed. James acknowledged the staff with a respectful nod, understanding their caution but hoping that the path ahead would be smoother. As they moved deeper into the airport, the hum of activity faded behind them. It felt as if the world had narrowed to this single mission, this single act of honor. Every step, every breath, every glance was a tribute to Thomas. By the time they reached the next stage of the journey, James had settled into a steady rhythm. The coffin was carefully loaded onto the transport cart, and his team followed his lead with precision. James kept his eyes forward, his mind focused on the task. He thought of the family waiting, the memories shared with Thomas, and the sacrifices made by so many soldiers like him. This mission was not just about one man. It was about a tradition of respect, bravery, and honor that stretched across generations. As part one of this journey came to a close, James felt a mixture of pride, sorrow, and determination. The path ahead would have challenges, both expected and unforeseen, but he was ready. He would face them with the same courage and discipline that had defined his career. Most importantly, he would ensure that Private Thomas Miller's final journey was marked by dignity, respect, and the honor that every fallen soldier deserves. The day had begun in darkness, but James knew that by the time the coffin reached its destination, it would be bathed in the light of human respect and remembrance. And for James, that light was everything. The airport was buzzing with activity, a constant hum of voices, rolling suitcases, and the squeak of trolley wheels across the polished floors. For most travelers, it was just another ordinary day, filled with the usual mix of excitement, impatience, and hurried steps. But for Captain James Harwood, the atmosphere felt completely different. Every sound seemed louder, every movement more pronounced. His focus was solely on the task at hand, escorting the coffin of Private Thomas Miller safely through the airport and onto the plane. The team moved carefully, ensuring the flag-draped coffin remained steady and dignified. Every soldier in the escort understood the importance of their actions. They were not just moving a body, they were carrying a story, a life, and a promise to the soldier's family. James kept his head high, eyes forward, his posture firm and calm. But beneath the disciplined exterior, his mind raced. He knew that airport procedures could be strict, and even the smallest delay could add unnecessary stress to a journey that was already heavy with sorrow. As they approached the first checkpoint inside the terminal, James noticed the staff exchanging cautious glances. The employees were polite but hesitant, clearly unsure about how to handle a situation that was out of the ordinary. The coffin, though wrapped in the national flag and accompanied by official military documents, was treated like an unusual cargo. A young staff member stepped forward, clipboard in hand, and politely asked for additional verification. James remained calm and respectful. He knew that arguing or showing frustration would only escalate the situation. He explained the mission clearly, showing all the required paperwork and emphasizing the solemn nature of the task. "This is a fallen soldier," he said in a calm voice, "and it is my duty to escort him with honor to his family. Every delay must be handled carefully, but the dignity of the soldier cannot be compromised." The staff member nodded but hesitated. More supervisors arrived, their faces serious, reflecting the weight of responsibility on their own shoulders. They questioned every detail, asking for signatures, checking IDs, and confirming procedures. James answered every question patiently, repeating himself when necessary, ensuring that his tone was always polite yet firm. He knew that his behavior needed to reflect the seriousness of the mission. Any sign of impatience could be seen as disrespectful, and he could not allow that. As the minutes passed, passengers began to notice the unusual scene. Some slowed down to watch, curiosity and concern in their eyes. A few whispered quietly to each other, trying to understand why the airport staff seemed hesitant to allow the coffin to pass. James barely acknowledged the attention, keeping his focus entirely on the task. He knew that the real story was not about their curiosity, but about fulfilling his duty to Thomas and his family. Despite the delays, James maintained a composed demeanor. He thought about Thomas, how brave he had been, how much he had given, and how proud his family would be of him. Those thoughts gave James strength. Each moment of waiting, each question from airport staff, was a test of his resolve. He reminded himself that the mission was not just a responsibility, but an honor. He was carrying the last memory of a life that had been dedicated to serving others, and every action he took had to reflect that honor. The tension in the terminal grew as the staff continued to check and double-check every document. James could feel a quiet pressure building around him. Supervisors whispered among themselves, glancing at the passengers who were beginning to gather near the scene. Some seemed impatient, but many appeared to sense the gravity of what was happening. James realized that he was not just managing an official task. He was guiding a moment of respect and remembrance that extended beyond the boundaries of bureaucracy. At one point, a supervisor suggested that the coffin be moved to a separate inspection area. James knew that this would delay the journey further and potentially compromise the dignity of the soldier. He calmly but firmly explained that moving the coffin unnecessarily could be seen as disrespectful. "The soldier has already served with honor," he said. "Our role is to ensure that he reaches his family with that same honor intact. Extra handling could diminish that respect, and that is something we cannot allow." The staff seemed to struggle with this concept. For them, rules and procedures were clear and rigid. For James, honor and respect were paramount. It was a delicate balance between following regulations and fulfilling a moral duty. He kept his voice steady and his body language open, showing neither anger nor frustration, only determination. Slowly, the staff began to understand the importance of his request. One by one, they agreed to allow the coffin to proceed without unnecessary handling. Even as the first hurdle was cleared, James knew that challenges lay ahead. Airports were complex, and further delays were possible. He briefed his team, reminding them to maintain their composure and to handle every movement with care. The coffin remained draped in the flag, every fold in place, every detail attended to. The soldiers moved in unison, their training evident in each step, their respect for Thomas clear in every gesture. As they continued through the terminal, James noticed the quiet reactions of passengers. Some bowed their heads in silent respect, others whispered prayers or words of encouragement. He appreciated their awareness but reminded himself to stay focused. Every step mattered, every instruction had to be precise. This journey was not about recognition from strangers, but about fulfilling a duty with absolute integrity. James also reflected on the nature of grief and honor. He thought about Thomas's family who were waiting somewhere, unaware of the exact challenges their son's escort was facing. He imagined their sorrow, their longing, and their anticipation. These thoughts fueled his determination. He understood that the journey was not just physical but emotional, a bridge between the battlefield and home, between loss and remembrance. Time passed slowly as they navigated security checks, customs procedures, and logistical requirements. Each stage required patience and careful negotiation. James answered every question, presented every document, and remained unwavering in his commitment to dignity and respect. The staff gradually began to see the mission through his eyes, recognizing that this was not routine cargo but a sacred responsibility. Despite the professionalism and calm, there were moments when James felt the weight of the task pressing down on him. He could hear the echoes of battlefield memories, the camaraderie with Thomas, and the fleeting moments of laughter they had shared. These memories were bittersweet, strengthening his resolve even as they reminded him of the loss. He allowed himself a moment to acknowledge the pain, then returned fully to his duty. The fallen soldier's honor depended on it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the team reached the area where the coffin could be moved toward the plane. The staff had accepted James's insistence on careful handling, and the immediate tension eased slightly. Yet James remained vigilant, aware that every step still required precision and respect. The soldiers lifted the coffin gently, ensuring that the flag remained perfectly aligned, and began the careful movement toward the awaiting transport vehicle. As they moved, James's mind wandered briefly to the broader meaning of his mission. It was not just about one soldier, but about all who had served and sacrificed. It was about standing firm in the face of obstacles, about balancing rules with human compassion, and about demonstrating that honor and dignity were values that transcended bureaucracy. Every gaze, every nod, every silent acknowledgement from passengers reinforced the significance of the journey. By the time part 2 of the journey came to an end, James and his team had overcome the initial challenges of the airport. The coffin was secure, the flag still perfectly draped, and the path to the plane was clear. The experience had tested their patience, diplomacy, and determination, but it had also reinforced the importance of their mission. James felt a deep sense of pride, not just for completing this stage of the escort, but for upholding the values of respect, honor, and duty that defined his role as a royal guard. As they prepared to board the aircraft, James took a final glance around the terminal. Passengers had returned to their routines, unaware of the significance of what had just passed through their midst. Yet he knew that the fallen soldier's story had left an impression, however quiet, on those who had witnessed it. For James, that was a reminder that honor could be recognized in subtle ways, and that every step of the journey mattered. The team continued forward, united in purpose, their movements precise and deliberate. Every detail was attended to, from the placement of the coffin to the handling of documents, to the respectful coordination with airport staff. James remained calm, focused, and resolute, knowing that the mission was far from over. The journey to the plane was a crucial stage, and he was determined that Thomas Miller's final journey would reflect the honor he had earned in life. As Captain James Harwood and his team moved further into the airport, the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface began to rise. The staff, although now somewhat cooperative, still appeared uneasy. Their eyes frequently darted toward the flag-draped coffin, and their whispers betrayed uncertainty. To James, this was more than routine hesitation. It was a subtle challenge to the dignity of the mission he carried. He could feel the weight of every gaze, every glance, and he understood that this was a test not of his authority, but of his resolve. The coffin remained the center of attention, resting on a carefully maneuvered cart, with soldiers on either side guiding its path. Every step had to be precise, every motion deliberate. James kept a calm face, his posture rigid yet composed, but inside he felt the familiar rush of responsibility that came with carrying the honor of a fallen comrade. Thomas Miller had been more than a soldier. He had been a friend, someone who had laughed in the darkest moments and had shared in the camaraderie that binds soldiers together. James could not let bureaucracy diminish that. As they approached another checkpoint, the situation began to escalate. A new supervisor appeared, unfamiliar with the previous arrangements, and he looked at the coffin with uncertainty. He asked for more paperwork, more verification, and questioned the team's authority. James, understanding the potential for delay, stepped forward immediately. "Sir," he said in a firm yet respectful tone. "This soldier has fallen in service to our country. Every delay must be handled with care, but we must maintain the dignity of the soldier at all times. My team and I are fully authorized, and all documentation has been provided." The supervisor glanced at the papers, then at the soldiers surrounding the coffin. He hesitated, caught between protocol and the obvious significance of the situation. James's voice remained steady, his calm presence filling the space. "We ask only for the respect owed to those who have given their lives in service. Extra handling, unnecessary inspections, or delays may diminish that respect. We seek only to honor the soldier." His words were firm, yet not confrontational. There was no anger in his voice, only a quiet determination that carried authority in its sincerity. Passengers had begun to notice the unfolding situation. Some slowed their pace to watch, whispering quietly among themselves. Others simply paused, sensing that something extraordinary was taking place. James did not allow their attention to distract him. He had faced far greater challenges on the battlefield, and he knew that the eyes of strangers could not sway the mission. Still, he appreciated the subtle acknowledgement of respect, the unspoken recognition that a life had been sacrificed and that its memory demanded honor. The supervisor's hesitation turned into insistence. He called for additional staff and even requested a brief consultation with airport security. James understood that arguments or displays of frustration would achieve nothing. He maintained his composure, answering each question calmly and repeatedly showing the required documents. His patience was tested, but he drew strength from the thought of Thomas's family, waiting somewhere for their son to return home. Every delay, every questioning glance reinforced the importance of his resolve. As the discussions continued, James noticed that the tension began to draw the attention of other passengers. Some stood quietly, observing the dignity and discipline of the soldiers. A few seemed moved, their heads bowed in silent acknowledgement of the sacrifice represented by the coffin. James realized that this moment, though complicated by procedure, was also a lesson in respect, one that extended beyond the boundaries of the military. It was a reminder that honor could touch the hearts of strangers, and that acts of dignity resonate quietly, even in bustling public spaces. At one point, the supervisor suggested moving the coffin to a separate room for additional inspection. James knew that this could cause unnecessary delay and diminish the solemnity of the moment. He approached the supervisor with calm authority. "Sir, I understand your concerns," he said, "but moving the coffin unnecessarily could be seen as disrespectful. Every step must reflect the honor owed to this soldier. Please allow us to proceed with care and dignity." His tone left no room for argument, yet it was filled with respect. The staff seemed to sense the gravity of James's words. They began to step back, recognizing that this was not just a matter of procedure but of human dignity. Slowly, the path ahead cleared, and the team was allowed to continue. James instructed his soldiers to maintain perfect alignment and careful handling. The coffin remained steady, the flag draped perfectly, a symbol of honor that no procedure could tarnish. Even with the immediate challenge resolved, James knew that the mission was far from over. Airports are complex places, and further obstacles could arise at any moment. He briefed his team quietly but clearly. "Stay alert, maintain discipline, and handle every movement with respect," he said. "Our responsibility is not over until we reach the aircraft and ensure that the soldier's dignity is preserved." Every soldier nodded, their faces reflecting understanding, respect, and quiet pride in the role they played. As they moved forward, James allowed himself a brief reflection. He thought about the broader significance of the mission. It was not just about transporting one fallen soldier. It was about standing firm in the face of unnecessary obstacles, about showing that respect and honor are values that transcend rules. It was about demonstrating to others, even strangers, that some things are more important than procedure, that dignity and humanity cannot be overlooked. The corridor ahead seemed long and challenging, with multiple intersections, checkpoints, and security measures. James guided his team carefully, ensuring that every step was deliberate and precise. They moved in unison, their footsteps quiet but steady, every soldier acutely aware of the responsibility they carried. James felt the weight of the coffin, not physically, but in the emotional and symbolic sense. It represented a life lived bravely, a sacrifice made, and the promise that those who serve will never be forgotten. Passengers continued to observe, some whispering words of encouragement, others bowing their heads in quiet respect. James appreciated their awareness but did not allow it to distract him. His focus was on maintaining the honor of the mission. He knew that Thomas's family would soon see their son again, and he wanted every detail of the journey to reflect the respect and care that the fallen soldier deserved. The team reached another checkpoint, where staff members seemed uncertain once more. James stepped forward again, his voice calm but commanding. "This soldier has given his life in service. We request that he be allowed to proceed with the dignity he deserves. All necessary documentation is provided, and every step has been handled with care. Please respect this mission." The words were simple, direct, and carried a quiet authority that left little room for debate. The supervisor, after a moment of thought, nodded. He recognized that James was not merely asserting authority, but advocating for the respect owed to a life sacrificed. The path cleared, and the soldiers carefully maneuvered the coffin toward the area where it would be transferred to the transport vehicle. Every movement was deliberate, every action thoughtful. The flag remained perfectly draped, a symbol of honor and courage. As part 3 of the journey progressed, James felt a deep sense of pride. The mission had tested his patience, diplomacy, and determination, but it had also reaffirmed the values he held most dear. Honor, respect, and duty had guided every decision, every word, every step. He realized that this journey was not only for Thomas, but also for every soldier who had served and sacrificed, a quiet statement that courage and dignity are never forgotten. Even as challenges continued to arise, James remained unwavering. He thought about the battlefield, the shared experiences with Thomas, and the lessons learned through service. These memories reinforced his resolve. Every obstacle at the airport, every question from staff, and every moment of hesitation became an opportunity to demonstrate the importance of human dignity over rigid procedure. Finally, after navigating multiple checkpoints, handling staff concerns, and ensuring every step was carried out with precision, James and his team reached the area where the coffin could be moved to the transport vehicle for the flight. The tension that had weighed heavily on the team began to ease slightly, though James remained vigilant. The mission was still critical, and every detail mattered. The soldiers carefully lifted the coffin, ensuring it remained stable and perfectly aligned, ready for the next stage of the journey. As they prepared to move, James allowed himself a moment to reflect on the broader impact of their actions. The passengers who had observed the scene, the staff who had learned the importance of respect, and the team who had carried out their duty all shared in this moment of honor. It was a quiet victory, not over anyone, but for the principle that courage, sacrifice, and dignity must always be recognized and upheld. By the end of Part 3, James and his team had faced the full complexity of the airport with calm, patience, and unwavering respect. They had navigated hesitation, delays, and procedural obstacles, all while maintaining the highest standards of dignity. The coffin remained secure, the flag perfectly draped, and the journey toward the plane continued, each step reflecting the honor of a fallen soldier and the steadfast commitment of those entrusted with his final journey. The soldiers carefully guided the coffin onto the transport vehicle, ensuring every movement was steady and dignified. Captain James Harwood's heart felt heavy yet resolute. After hours of careful negotiation, patient explanations, and precise movements, they had successfully navigated the airport, overcoming hesitations and obstacles that could have delayed the mission or, worse, diminished the dignity owed to Private Thomas Miller. Now the final stage of the journey awaited, the flight home and delivery to the family who had waited, perhaps anxiously, for this moment. The team moved in perfect unison, each soldier attentive to the coffin, the flag draped over it symbolizing not just a life lost, but the pride, courage, and honor of a country. The transport vehicle drove slowly toward the aircraft, and James maintained a vigilant eye on every detail. Every fold of the flag had to remain perfect, every step deliberate, every action reflective of the solemnity of the mission. Even though the airport staff had finally stepped aside, James knew his responsibility was far from over. He carried not just a coffin, but the memory and sacrifice of a life, entrusted to his hands for this final passage. As they approached the plane, the hum of the engines grew louder, signaling the imminent continuation of the journey. James's mind was a mix of emotions: sorrow for his friend, pride in fulfilling his duty, and a deep sense of responsibility for the family waiting at the destination. He thought about Thomas, the laughter they had shared, the long nights spent on duty, the conversations that had lifted their spirits even in difficult times. Now Thomas would return home not as the soldier he once was in life, but as a symbol of sacrifice, bravery, and honor. The coffin was lifted carefully into the aircraft, each soldier moving in precise harmony. James directed every movement, ensuring the flag remained undisturbed, that the body was secure, and that every detail reflected dignity. The cabin crew watched in quiet respect, understanding the significance of the moment. Even the pilot, who had seen countless flights and passengers, paused briefly, nodding in recognition of the gravity of the situation. This was no ordinary flight. It carried not just a soldier, but the weight of memory, loss, and honor across the skies. Once inside the plane, James and his team positioned the coffin in a manner that allowed them to attend to it throughout the journey. The soldiers remained alert yet calm, their presence a reminder of the respect and protection that had accompanied Thomas throughout his life in service. James sat nearby, silently reflecting on the journey so far. He thought about the airport staff, the passengers, and the many small acts of acknowledgement that had shown him that even strangers recognized the importance of this duty. These reflections brought him a quiet sense of comfort amid the sorrow. The plane began to taxi, the engines roaring softly beneath the solemnity of the cabin. James's mind wandered to the family awaiting their son. He imagined their grief, their longing, and the moments of hope that must have carried them through the waiting. Each mile traveled brought Thomas closer to those who loved him, closer to the chance for proper mourning and remembrance. James felt the enormity of the responsibility, but also the honor. Few experiences matched the profound duty of bringing a fallen soldier home. As the plane ascended, James allowed himself a brief, private reflection. He thought about the battlefield, about Thomas's bravery, and the countless sacrifices that soldiers make in service to their country. Every mission, every patrol, every moment of camaraderie had prepared him for this moment. Now, the battlefield was far behind, replaced by the quiet solemnity of the cabin and the gentle hum of flight. Yet the sense of duty remained as strong as ever, reminding him that honor is not bound by location, time, or circumstance. Throughout the flight, James and his team ensured that every detail of the coffin's care remained perfect. They checked the flag, adjusted the positioning as needed, and maintained a constant presence. The soldiers exchanged quiet words occasionally, offering support to one another, but the tone remained solemn. Each was aware that this journey was about more than protocol. It was about human dignity, respect, and the fulfillment of a promise to a family waiting far below. Passengers and crew who were aware of the mission maintained a respectful silence. Some cast quiet glances toward the coffin, recognizing the significance of the journey. James appreciated this, understanding that respect for sacrifice transcends familiarity and position. Even in the midst of a routine flight, the presence of honor and duty created a profound sense of awareness. It was a reminder that courage and sacrifice resonate beyond immediate circles, touching lives even indirectly. As the aircraft neared the destination, James's thoughts became increasingly focused on the family. He imagined their emotions, the sorrow of loss, the anticipation of seeing their son one last time, and the gratitude for the honor shown in this final journey. The reality of the moment was nearly upon them. James felt a mix of relief and renewed determination. This was the culmination of hours of care, patience, and discipline, and he was determined that every final act would reflect the highest level of respect. The landing was smooth, and as the plane taxied to the gate, James coordinated with the ground crew and local officials to ensure a seamless transfer. Every step had been planned, but unforeseen complications could always arise. He remained vigilant, ensuring that the dignity of the mission remained intact. Soldiers moved with precision, guiding the coffin with care and maintaining the flag in perfect display. Even the smallest detail mattered. Honor could be measured in the smallest gestures as much as the grandest acts. Once the aircraft doors opened, James and his team carefully maneuvered the coffin down the ramp. The flag remained undisturbed, and the soldiers maintained a solemn formation around it. The airport staff and local personnel watched with quiet respect, understanding that this was a moment of profound importance. James's face remained composed, but inside he felt a wave of emotion, sorrow, pride, and the quiet satisfaction of fulfilling a duty with the utmost care. Outside, the family waited. They had been informed of the arrival, and the atmosphere was heavy with grief, yet also anticipation. Thomas's parents, his siblings, and a few close friends stood together, their faces a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. As the coffin approached, they bowed their heads in silent respect. James stepped forward, ensuring that the coffin was delivered with perfect precision and utmost care. Every movement, every gesture, every word reflected the honor owed to their son. When the coffin was finally in position, James saluted. It was a formal gesture, yet also deeply personal. He had carried his friend through challenges, through bureaucracy, through the quiet turbulence of emotion, and now he had fulfilled the promise to ensure that Thomas Miller returned home with dignity. The family's eyes glistened with tears, some falling freely, others held back by the weight of emotion. They understood that the respect shown in every step of the journey spoke volumes about their son's life and the sacrifices he had made. The parents approached the coffin, their hands trembling as they touched the flag. They looked at James, their eyes full of gratitude, and whispered words of thanks. James nodded silently, understanding that words could never fully convey the honor he felt in performing this duty. He had ensured that Thomas's final journey was one of dignity, respect, and recognition, a journey befitting a life of courage and service. As the ceremony concluded, James reflected on the journey. It had begun with sorrow, been tested with challenges, and now ended in a quiet moment of closure. The airport staff, passengers, and soldiers had all played a part, consciously or unconsciously, in honoring the sacrifice of a life. James realized that this was the essence of his duty: to uphold respect, to navigate challenges with integrity, and to ensure that every soldier, every individual who gave their all would never be forgotten. Finally, as the family prepared to leave, James and his team stepped back. They had completed the mission with the dignity and honor it demanded. Thomas Miller had returned home, not as the young soldier who had once trained and laughed with friends, but as a symbol of bravery, sacrifice, and the enduring respect of those entrusted with his final journey. James felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that every step, every action, and every decision had contributed to this moment. As he walked away from the scene, James understood that this experience would remain with him forever. It was a testament to the power of patience, the importance of honor, and the courage it takes to stand firm even when faced with unnecessary obstacles. The journey had been long, emotional, and challenging, but it had also been a profound reminder of why duty, respect, and human dignity matter above all else. Even as the airport faded behind him, the memory of the mission remained vivid. James knew that he had fulfilled not just an obligation, but a promise to a friend, to a family, and to the values that define those who serve. It was a quiet victory, a solemn reflection of courage and respect, and a testament to the enduring bonds of honor that connect all who serve and sacrifice.